Okay, thank you for coming. And dear guests and friends, thank you for coming and join our SAT event. I'm Guo Alun from the Institute of Energy, Environmental and Economy from Tsinghua University in China. And this SAT event is joint organized by our institute from China and the Climate Change Center from South Korea, and also Renewable Energy Institute from Japan. So for this side event, we will discuss and also share the knowledge of the opportunities and the challenges existing in the low carbon development and energy transition in China, South Korea, and Japan. And for our schedule, so first we will invite the Professor Liu Bin, our Deputy Director of Institute of Energy, Environmental and Economy, Tsinghua University, to give some opening remarks. Okay.
Hello. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's very nice to meet you in Bonn. Today, experts from Korea's Climate Change Center and the Renewable Energy Research Institute and from Japan and China Tsinghua University co-organized this SAT event. We hope to share and discuss our respective achievements of research on energy transformation and low carbon development in Northeast Asia. As you know, that the Chinese government has always been actively addressing the issues of global climate change and has made the promotion of green and low carbon development an important part of civilization construction, as well as a great opportunity to speed up to the transformation of economic development mode and economic structure adjustment. As an important region of future global economic development, Asia's energy transition directly related to the future of Asia's economic development in the world. The role of China, Japan, and South Korea as Asia's major economics will be crucial. Therefore, our topic today is of far-reaching significance to the future development of Asia. Our Institute of GCCI of Tsinghua University has long been devoted to the policy research on climate change. In recent years, it has also provided a lot of research support on China's energy transition and low carbon development for the NDRC, the Energy Bureau, and other relevant policy-making departments. Today, we would like to share with you our latest research resource and hope to take this opportunity to make friends, exchange views, and promote our cooperation. Thank you. Thank you again for your attendance. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Liu. So next, we will invite the manager, Nishida, to give the opening remarks, please.
Thank you for joining us for our slide event on energy transition and how low carbon development in Northeast Asia. I'm Yuko Nishida from Renewable Energy Institute in Japan, and I'm very happy to have this event with our great friends, Tsinghua University in China and Climate Change Center in South Korea. Renewable Energy Institute was established 6 years ago, soon after the Fukushima accident, to promote renewable energy for a low-carbon society without nuclear dependency. In 6 years, energy and its use environment has drastically changed in Japan. I will tell you later on, but energy transition has already started in Japan and moving forward. The same Fukushima accident that motivated our founder to establish our institute, globally, it drove many entities to go forward to energy transition. The accident itself was tragic, but we have the passion to continuously keep on working. Today, we are focusing in Asia. Asia is a key area for solving global climate change because of its huge population and growing economy. We have to be hurry to avoid lock-in effect in various fields. But I know in a broad Asia, we have various good practices, technologies, and bottomless passion for action. Exchange such wisdom and collaborating Asian communities definitely become successful steps toward a low-carbon Asia. I hope our talk today will be a step for a low-carbon Asia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Liu and Manager Nishida. And for our side event, so the next session, we invite the 3 country experts. So they will deliver their speech. So the first speaker come from the Tsinghua University, is the Associate Professor Dr. Zhou Jian, please.
Afternoon. I'm Zhou Jian, come from Tsinghua University. I think this is my honor to introduce the China's the low carbon transition as policies, and this is a good platforms to experience among the China, South Korea, and Japan. I met my old friend, Dr. King, but I think this is today's topic because we have focused on the energy transitions. China this is the Chinese history of the energy consumption. We can see that is the consumption in 1916s and almost 100 million tons. And also, okay. And also, so for China, about global climate change mitigations, and for this presentation, we can see China is now the world's largest energy consumers and the CO2 emitters. And that is for CO2 emissions from fossil fuel use and And for China, that is maybe to be for the international climate pledges, that is China NDC. After the Paris Climate Conference, for China, we have to achieve the peaking of CO2 emissions around 2030 and making best efforts to peak early. And to low carbon dioxide emissions per unit of GDP by from 6 to 65% by 2030 from the 25 levels. And also for China, we have to increase the share of non-fossil fuels in primary energy consumption to around 20% by 2030. That is the domestic China policies. For the 75-year planning for China, that is 2 targets. One is energy intensive target, that is should reduce 15% relative to 2015. And the second is a carbon intensive target, that is reduce 18% relative to 2015. And in the same time, that is a non-fossil energy target. That is 15% of non-fossil fuels in primary energy supply by 2020. For that is transitioning to for China is to a low carbon economy. We can see the share of non-fossil fuels in primary energy supply reaches 15% in 2016, and also we can see that is the carbon emission per unit of GDP. That is more the low levels, almost 43%. Just 2 weeks ago, Mr. Xi Jinping, in his report to 19th National Congress of CPC, he put forward the splitting up reform of the system for developing ecological civilization and building a beautiful China. That way to Mr. Xi Jinping put forward 2 stages. One is from 2020 to 2035. There is a fundamental improvement in the environment. The goal of building a beautiful China is basically attained. And the second, that is almost 2050. New heights reached in ever dimensions of ecological advancements. So, for China, how to achieve the 2 stage under the new economic rapid growth trend, let me maybe for energy consumption and the CO2 emission is actively curbed through change development drivers and growth models. As from 25 to 2013, annual growth rate of energy consumption averaged 6%, while from 2013 to 2016, it fell at the average 1.5%. Newly added energy demand is mainly satisfied by increasing non-fossil energy supply. So CO2 emission basically remains stable. From 25 to 2013, annual growth rates of non-fossil energy and the CO2 emission averaged 10% and 5% respectively. In the same time, annual growth rate of non-fossil energy averaged almost 10%, while CO2 emission stayed basically unchanged. In the same time, economical low-carbon transformation accelerates from 2005 to 2013. Annual decline rates of CO2 intensity of GDP averaged 4.3%, while it rose to 6.7% from 2013 to 2016. In future, for China, as a GDP growth rate will stabilize, energy consumption, electricity may be rebound. If it goes more than 0.3, newly added long-force energy supply will be insufficient for the increase of total energy demand. So, CO2 emission will rise, but the rise rate would be very low. In China, the energy production and the consumption revolution strategies from 2016 to 2013, that is EPCRS. EPCRS propose to control total energy consumption to less than 5 billion TCE in 2020, less than 6 billion TCE in 2030, and to have it stabilized in 2050. In 2030, electricity from long-fossil fuel accounts for half of total electricity. All that time, about 50% of prime energy will go for power generating. So, the proportion of long-fossil fuel in prime energy would be about 25%. In 2050, long-fossil energy would account for over 50% of total prime energy consumption. Long-fossil power would account for almost 60 to 80% of the total electricity, and the coal would account for less than 30% in prime energy consumption. So, in 2050, CO2 emission for China will be much less than the peaking emissions. The second, that is for China, that should to promote energy supply revolution and build a clean and low-carbon energy supply systems. Vigorous develop renewable energy power, including water, wind, solar, and nuclear power, as well as natural gas and other zero and low-carbon energy. Increase of energy consumption will mainly be satisfied by newly added clean energy supply. In future, the proportion of long fossil fuel will keep increasing, while that of coal keeps falling. For China, to achieve its NDC target, long fossil energy power capacity ought to exceed 1.3 billion kilowatt in 2030, and which is more than the total power capacity of the US. Strengthens the clean and efficient use of fossil fuel, especially the use of coal, and research and demonstrate the CCS technology. Energy consumption per unit electricity supply of existing coal-fired power plants will fall to 310 GCE per kWh in 2020. Comprehensively built Internet Plus intelligent energy system facilitate deep integration of energy and modern information technology, and develop a smart grid and distribute energy network. The second, I think, that is should promote the energy consumption revolution, save enhance energy efficiency and control total energy consumption. Energy strategies ought to not only aim to guarantee the supply, but also guide and adjust demand and control total energy consumption, especially coal consumption. For China, industry accounts for almost 70% of terminal energy consumption. So it is a main area for energy conservation. China will strive to achieve the peaking of CO2 emission from industry before 2020. Fully release the energy saving potential in building sector and control total area of building. In 2020, new building area will reach 65% of energy saving standards, and the renewable energy consumption take up 25% of total energy consumption of the building sector. In transportation sectors, that is, we have formulate green and low carbon transportation systems, optimize transportation structure and vehicle fuel compensations, develop electrical automobiles, and enhance the promotion of bus travel. Changing the concept of consumption, encouraging public participation and voluntary action, and form a green low carbon lifestyle. In the third, that is should to how to harmonize the different policies. That is should combine the haze management and environment quality improvements, decrease terminal use of coal, increase the proportion of electricity in terminal energy consumption, and facilitate renewable energy demand development. That is, should reduce the quality and the proportion of coal terminal utilizations, replace bulk coal with electricity, and pay special attention to develop distribute renewable energies. And also, that is should to enhance the proportion of primary energy used for power generation and the proportion of electricity in terminal energy consumptions. The proportion of primary energy consumption used for power generation was 34% in 2000. We rose to 41% in 2015, and is estimated to be 50% in 2030 and 60% in 2015. The proportion of electricity in terminal energy consumption was 22% in 2015, and is expected to reach about 30% in 2030. The growth rate of electricity consumption will surpass that of total energy consumptions. Finally, so that is in 17 is another policy that is comes from the national ETS. That is scenarios from the different carbon price S1 and S2. That is without the low carbon price, but we will take note of the S2. That is peaking scenarios for China. And from 33 to 35, that is different pricings. We can also to take note of that is different carbon price will to impact on the energy structures. So that is the carbon price. Carbon price policy will help to optimize the supply side of the electrical power industry. First of all, carbon pricing policy will inhibit the capacity of the power industries, whether the output from the coal-fired power unit or gas-fired power unit will both receive different surprising effects of carbon pricing policy. Secondly, we can also note that the carbon price policy will to promote more surprising effects on the electricity production capacity of coal-fired power units than that of the gas-fired power units. So we have to have to optimize the energy side of the power industry. That's my all the presentation. Thanks for everyone.
Thank you, Professor Zhou Jian. I think that depending our schedule, so if we have some time remaining, so we are open for the Q&A section. So our next speaker is Zhou Jun Kim. He is the member of the Committee of Policy Planning at Climate Change Center and Managing Director of Solutions for Our Climate from the South Korea. Please, Kim.
Good afternoon. As introduced, my name is Jujin Kim. As just introduced, I am a policy committee member of the Climate Change Center. At the same time, I lead a nonprofit named Solutions for Our Climate in Korea. We mainly focus on climate and air policy. I have a brief introduction slide on what we do at the end of our slides. Today, I would like to go over the story of coal, the status of coal, nuclear, gas combined, and renewables, namely solar, in Korea. Before going into that, I think I will have to first give you a snapshot of on what grounds the Korean power market operates. First of all, the Korean power market, we don't have natural gas in Korea. We also do not have pipeline gas in Korea because of North Korea. In South Korea, we don't have natural gas, pipeline gas. So we have to rely on liquefied natural gas, which is expensive, and which means that gas combined are on the backside of the dispatch order, and thus subject to a lot of stranded asset risks. Number two, air pollution in Korea is cheap. There are barely any SOx and NOx charges, which means that we have a very good environment for coal to proliferate. Number three, we do have an ETS, but the role as a fuel switcher of the ETS, of the carbon price, has been neutralized by the power market operator. I will go into this point later on. The power market operator is controlled by Korea's most biggest utility, KEPCO. Number four, consumer prices are capped, which makes it a very difficult environment for renewable energy subsidies. Number five, we have our power market is horizontally and vertically monopolized. One utility group owns 80% of our power generation assets. It also owns the distribution and transmission network, and it also can practically control the power market operator. And in order to discuss what is happening in terms of policy here in Korea, we will have to go 5 and 10 years back to the Myung-Bak Lee administration, which was between 2008 and 2013. Those of you who have been in the climate change world for a long time will know that this president was famous for his push on green growth. He did a lot of good things for green growth. First of all, he announced a very ambitious target, Copenhagen target, 2020 target. He also introduced, his administration also introduced the ETS, which is well operating now in Korea. His administration also hosted the headquarters of the GCF and the GCCI. His administration also, although not really deeply relevant to greenhouse gas emissions, it also permitted a lot of nuclear power plants, and at the same time and incoherently, it also permitted 22 new coal power plants, which represent a 67% increase in Korea's coal capacity. The details of the coal power plants are here. 22 are up there. The ones in the red letters are the ones that have come into the grid this year. This year, 7 units representing 6 gigawatts, about a 22% increase in coal capacity, has been introduced to the grid this year alone. The ones in the black, the red box, are quite important because these coal power plants, which were introduced in 2013 on the very last day of the Myeongbak-Lee administration, made Korea eventually practically repeal its 2020 Copenhagen target, 2020 target. I will go into the details of that later on. I also have some good news about the list of 22 power plants over there. The last one down there, I have some good news about that. Very, very brand new and hot news. So this was Korea's 2020 target, which was announced in 2009 before the Copenhagen negotiations. It was confirmed by the government until 2014. It represented a 30% reduction from its BAU level as of 2020, and the figures were 543 million tons. This table is a little bit complicated. You can see the orange line down there. That the end of the orange line is the 2020 target. But 2013, as I said, the red arrows up there, 7 units of coal were added to our power were permitted, which represented, according to Thomson Reuters, about 100 million tons increase in emissions. So the government had to figure out, then compare, and before Paris, what to do with this, and then came Paris and the season where all the countries submitted their INDCs. Korea, I think, first tried to sneak away with the increase here. You could see a round oval up there on the left side over there. That was the range that Korea initially announced as its range of INDCs. It was a backtrack from its 2020 target. Interestingly, one day after our government announced that target, President Obama calls our president, President Park Geun-hye, who was impeached, and says, let's do a good job in Paris, which at the working level meant you got to do better than that. So eventually our target INDC became the dot at the right-hand bottom side over there. It represents a 7 million ton, merely 7 million tons from our 2020 target, 536 million tons. However, because of the coal up there, it was evident that we will not be able to meet that target. So with domestic emissions, so that's why Korea's INDC has an international credit commitment. So basically, the 96 million tons that Korea is committing to in its INDC from international markets is an offset of the new coal power plants planned to be up there. What's making the situation more complicated, and I will go on to this in my next slide, is the fact that this government, the current government, is mainly focused on nuclear, phasing out nuclear. So the deficit, the international credit commitment, the amount that will be required will have to increase somehow, or a lot of things may happen in between. As I said, the current administration is very much focused on phasing out nuclear, and which also, unfortunately, means that it is less interested, phasing out coal is less of a priority for this government. And it also means that the climate target is less of a priority to the government as well. The new president, who was elected last May, just a few weeks after he was elected, announces that he would cancel these new the black plants down there, 6 plants down there, and that he would subject the red plant, Shinkory 5-6, to a deliberation procedure. The reason why the Shinkory 5 and 6 were subject to a deliberation procedure was because the progress rates of that plant was more than 20%, so a lot of costs were paid there. Unfortunately for the government, the results of the deliberation procedure were not that good. I believe it was a political failure for our current government because the approval rate of the Shinkory 5 and 6 plant was 60%. According to the opinion poll collected by the deliberation committee at the time. More interestingly, the approval rates were higher in southeastern and eastern Korea. Southeastern and eastern Korea is the Fukushima of Korea. It's where all our nuclear plants are concentrated. At the same time, it is the most conservative area of Korea. So what this deliberation process eventually did was it transformed nuclear, which was not a partisan issue before, into a partisan issue. So in that respect, I don't think it was a properly managed process. Gas, a very sad story. I told you a lot about that 7 units of coal came into the grid this year. A lot of nuclear came into the grid during the past couple of years as well, which means that gas, which is on the behind side, last side of our dispatch order, is losing a lot of opportunities to dispatch power. So you can see the dispatch rates going down like that. And I think likely, I mean, that's 2015 figures. If you go look into the 2017 figures, the figures are going to be quite devastating. So the story, the perspective of gas is very bad unless we introduce a very strong air pollution price and have an effective carbon price. However, the current government seems to have some rely on gas, and as when it does its coal phase out and nuclear phase out, when it argues that it has to phase out nuclear and coal, it says that let's convert those plants into natural gas plants. However, the thing is that the market is not responding to that. To the market, gas combined is not reliable anymore. It's not financiable anymore. Solar. I will talk about solar as part of my renewable discussion, and this is not only about Korea's solar subsidy scheme. This slide represents not only the solar subsidy scheme, but it also represents the problem that the structure of the Korean power market has. Important feature of the Korean power market, as I mentioned, is that consumer power prices are capped, which means there is limited room for the utility to provide subsidies to solar utilities. Before 2012, there was a time when we had an FIT. And unfortunately, during those times, oil prices were high, and PV prices were high as well, which means that KEPCO, the utility which has a limited cash flow due to the capped consumer prices, was in distress. I mean, it was frustrated by all these renewable power plants, solar power plants coming up with the good FIT scheme at that time. So Korea in 2012 scraps the FIT scheme and converts it to an REC scheme. So in an REC scheme, you have to find the cash flow of a nuclear solar plant is consisted of two factors: a fluctuating wholesale power price and a fluctuating REC renewable credit price, which means that for bankers it's difficult to finance. So it was the dark ages for Korean solar and renewables. I mean, all kinds of other renewables as well. But after 2017, you've noticed that, and you may know that a lot fuel prices have come down a lot, and PV prices as well. So KEPCO has some breathing room, and thus right now the Korean government offers a 20-year fixed price contract with a very good price, at a very good price, and the solar market right now is very hot. The bottleneck in the Korean solar market is the land permitting issue, and other than that, it's just you see just so much money going into the market. However, the risk here is that if oil prices go up, if KEPCO realizes that its own subsidiary companies are suffering because of the influx of of solar, or it realizes that it's giving out just too much subsidies, it may just decide to reduce the subsidies. Practically, it may induce the government to reduce the subsidies. So that is the risk that this market structure accompanies. Summary: nuclear, the government. There will be some cancellations with nuclear. I can't see. That means that there will be some difficulties for a government meeting its climate target, and there will be some compromise with that, probably. And coal would be the power. Coal will be the power source enjoying the vacuum provided by nuclear. However, coal is subject to a lot of resistance in Korea now. Air pollution. Coal financing has been a topic now in Korea. It has been subject to coal. There has been discussions on restricting coal, and I'll show you the results of that in my next slide. We have seen some good results with that. Gas combined, still sad story, unless we have a very fundamental change in the pricing structure. Renewables, bright, however, subject to the KEPCO, the fundamental market structure risk, where you have a utility that has a conflict of interest in this, in proliferation solar. Unless we have a fundamental change in our market structure, there will be some limitations in deployment of renewables in Korea. Good news. This is only 5 hours old. You can see that the article is dated November 7th today. I just received it while I was coming to this meeting room. Among the 22 units that were planned, that were on the pipeline, 9 units were in the pipeline. 2 units just decided to convert its plant. Right now, they say they're going to convert it to LNG, to a natural gas plant. I'm not sure whether that will realize, but anyways, they are not doing coal anymore. The main reason why that happened was because during last month's National Assembly procedure, we have a national audit every year, and during the national audit procedure, KDB, which has a 15% equity in this project, and which was also planned to project finance this project, was subject to a lot of criticism. Why KDB is, as you may know, and for those of you may know, is also a GCF implementing agency. So it was subject to a lot of criticism about why its involvement in coal, and that led KDB to hesitate on this project, and which eventually made the project company decide that we're no longer going on coal with this. This will save a lot of emissions for Korea. So my last slide is about us. We are a nonprofit established last year. We work on coal finance, imposing a proper price on pollution. We also do a lot of work to improve our energy market governance. And we also do a lot of monitoring of Korea's climate target and the ETS. So thank you very much. This is the end of my slide, and please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. So for the last speaker is come from the climate change group of Renewable Energy Institute. The manager, Nishida, please.
Okay, so thank you for the opportunity. So again, from myself, I'm going to talk about the status of the energy transition in Japan, and talk a little bit about the low carbon development, focusing the building sector because it's really broad areas. Okay, about the Renewable Energy Institute. The institute has established 6 years ago, and just after the Fukushima accident, to promote renewable energy and low carbon society based on the scientific researches. So we are really focusing the scientific research. Our activities are also based on our global knowledge base. You can see some familiar names here, so they are all our friends. And these are the part of our recent publications. We are keen on doing scientific research and making proposals for governments and stakeholders. So this is my outline today. So first, I'm talking about the status of the energy transition by using some data and some policy issues that is really related to the Korea situation, and at the end, some low carbon developments focusing building sector. First of all, I can say in Japan, energy transition is getting visible finally after 2011. Even if the government has intended so or not, I will show you some data, and the left side graph shows energy consumption trend. After 2011, it's decreasing, and it's even decoupled from economic growth. You can see in the red one. The same decreasing tendency is shown in the electricity sales in the right-hand graph. Since 2010, it's down about 10%. Another aspect of the energy transition is renewable energy growth. In Japan, after 2012, it increases drastically, mainly because the feed-in tariff has introduced in 2012. Actually, in 2016, 15% of all electricity generation is from renewables. That is 6 points up from 2010. The capacity of installed PV panels now exceeds the nuclear capacity. Then, looking at nuclear, after the Fukushima disaster, all nuclear power plants were shut down, and right now only 5 of them are operating. Red area in the left side graph shows the diminishing power generation by then, which is only 2% of total power generation in 2016. Although some plants have been permitted to operate, it is clear they are not coming back as it was. The rest of the power source, coal and other thermal power plants, are also decreasing their share, finally. As you can see in the left graph, soon after the accidental nuclear withdrawal, thermal plants were the important source to replace it. However, the renewable energy increase and energy efficiency and saving are taking part in. As the right graph shows, now 70% of power that used to be from nuclear has replaced by energy efficiency and renewables. But you have to check the total thermal power generation is decreasing, but the coal is steadily increasing. This is a big issue in Japan, I think. So about the overall trend of GHG or CO2 emissions, due to the deteriorated emission factor by the nuclear withdrawal, even with the drastic energy consumption reductions, GHG emissions went up from 2010 to 2013. However, renewable introduction and proceeding energy consumption reductions, it seems that the GHG emissions peaked out in 2013 and start decreasing. Then let's see how is the policy status in Japan. There are the Japanese policy targets. GHG targets for 2030 is 26 to 28% reduction from 2005 level. To achieve this target, some sub-targets are set in renewables and nuclear. Also, energy efficiency targets are set as 30% improve. But when we check these targets by current numbers, like in 2015 or 2016, they can be achievable, except nuclear. But I cannot say it's good sign. I just want to say that there are not a good indicators to measure our ambitions. There are the energy mix for, these are the energy mix for electricity generation. The real trend shows the rapid growth in renewables and lagged nuclear, and starting decrease in summer power. So we have to reconsider the targets. Without ambitious targets, With renewables and energy efficiency, Japan is still pursuing the baseload concept. About the policy for renewables, feed-in tariff has been successful to increase the renewable deployment. Some cost down are realized, and renewable industry has also grown. Of course, there are some challenges. Feed-in tariff mainly went for solar PVs and not for wind power. Such imbalance should be coped with, and although the cost decreased, but not showing a large drop like the global trend is going on. Also, feed-in tariff operation has some problems such as curtailment and unfair legislation rules. So in order to realize the large potential in renewable in Japan, feed-in tariff rules has to be improved, and also other power system reform now we are taking coping with should be including market liberalization should be pursued persistently. And the coal issue. This is really serious. In the previous graph, we saw the coal power generation has increased. But in addition to that, many new coal power plants are developing right now. Now 42 all over the country like this. This is partly because the misleading national policy that tells the coal as the major base load power source. Imperfect power market reform also pushes newcomers to involve in coal power plants, and investors' ignorance and or powerlessness affect this issue. Emissions from these coal power plants are really a matter for Japan to achieve the Paris Agreement goal. Renewable Energy Institute has just published the research report to highlight that Japan's coal business, including new plants, are facing significant business risk. For example, our emission of capacity factor operation rate is much lower than those projection by the governmental organization. And it is likely to drop more if the power demand declines. This is really serious. These numbers are our message to the developers and investors to the coal power plants. Please see our reports and think about it. I brought salmon out and put outside table, so please take that. Okay, for final part, for low carbon developments, there are actually many actions and policies going on. So I took building sector as an example and picked some of these seems effective and interesting. Of course, about the low carbon development in building sector, you have to see the energy code and code related regulations. In Japan, finally in 2017, energy code mandate has begun. But before that, standards has been implemented, but enforcement has not been strict enough, so finally. Also, the top runner regulation are very famous as an effective policy tool for energy efficiency promotion for many years. This top-liner system has also expanded to materials, building materials, and housing units itself. Regarding zero-emission houses, based on the roadmap, definition of the zero-emission house, clear meaning of the policy targets have set. The major policy is actually the large-scale subsidy. For example, it goes more than 12,000 houses in only 2016. So we're gonna have more than 20,000 zero-emission houses this year or the next year. So, but here I'd like to introduce zero-emission house builder program, which requires builders to participate in if they want to get involved in the zero-emission housing construction projects. For zero-emission house development, it is necessary to enhance the capacity of the builders, but also such subsidy plus requirement program is expected to motivate various builders. So now I can say the zero-emission housing is really realized in a high speed. Zero-emission building program is also launched, but more challenges to promote such as technological and cost issues. And lastly, local government efforts should be mentioned, I think. Regarding the building energy efficiency, for new building as well existing buildings, local government's program are expanding, and they approach to owners and stakeholders of each building. Among them, the cap and trade program by Tokyo Metropolitan Government and Saitama Prefecture, which covers building sector, is very effective, and it is also replicable globally. In the end, I want to tell you again, energy transition has already started, and we have to take it granted when we think about the future businesses and actions. We hope Japanese policy consider more on this and take a leadership to accelerate the transition toward a low-carbon society. And for that, REI is continuously working on. Thank you very much.
So thank you for Nishida. So I think that we are still on our schedule. So the next session, we will invite 4 panel members to have the panel discussion. So I think that we will invite all the panel members maybe to sit here. And for this session, okay, please. So first member is Dr. Liu Qiang, is the Director of Strategy and Planning Department from the National Center for Climate Change Strategy and International Cooperation from China. And the second panel is Duan Fengjun. He is a Senior Research Fellow from the Kano Institute of Global Studies from Japan. And the third one is the Dr. Jungjin Kim. And the last panel is the manager Nishida from the Renewable Energy Institute. I think that first for the previous section that there is a very comprehensive presentation from each country's experts. And for these panel members, and we will maybe only, I think, share their knowledge or give some comments from their experience about energy transition and also low carbon developments. And also that I think that maybe depend on your experience, so you can make some detailed examples of for the case about each country's experience. So first we will invite Dr. Liu Qiang, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. My name is Liu Qiang. I'm coming from the National Center for Climate Change Strategy and International Cooperation, NCSC. Working on the energy and climate change issue for many years, I think it's low carbon transition of energy also one of very important work for me. And just like Dr. Zhou Jian mentioned, there's a lot of low carbon transition issues in China, especially on energy system. From my side, I just want to briefly maybe add in some my personal points on these issues. First one, I think it's quite briefly regarding the Chinese energy situation. I think it's three key words. One is very high demand. China's energy consumption, I think, is more than the energy demand of United States and also European Union together. Second one is coal. Consumption still the dominant energy resources in China, which is quite different from most of other countries in the world. And third one, I think the energy also contribute most of carbon emission and greenhouse gas emission in China, more than 70%. So this is quite basically picture of Chinese energy situation. So for China, I think it's the most important thing to achieve the low carbon transition of energy. It's two issues. One is how to control the total energy consumption growth. Especially, I think it's in last several years, its energy demand increase becomes lower, but we still need to control the total energy demand. And second one is how to diversify the energy structure, especially how to increase the share of the renewable energy and non-fossil nuclear, which is belong to low carbon energy. So in last actually couple of years, Chinese government put a lot of efforts into these two aspects. First one, controlling the energy demand, especially how to control the coal consumption. I think it's due to the air pollution controlling measures and other concerns. We have very clear targets and we have a lot of variety of policies on coal consumption controlling, which I think that the share of the coal consumption already reduced from the 72% in last 10 years, in 10 years before, to currently 62%, almost reduced by 10%. Which means a large amount of coal consumption. And also in last 3 years, actually, the total coal consumption decreased gradually. This is the first time appear in China in last 50 years. And second one is, I think, is renewable energy. It's actually, China now is the top one in the world in total renewable energy, installed capacity of renewable energy, and also that the capacity of the hydro, wind, solar energy. And I think that currently the installed capacity of wind is more than like around 150 gigawatts, and also the solar is around 76 gigawatts, which is quite big number. And like Dr. Zhou Jian mentioned, that we almost achieved that most incremental energy demands already be satisfied by non-fossil fuel energy, mainly by renewable energy. And third one, I think it's currently this year, is Chinese government to release one very important document, policy document we call that Energy Revolution Strategy by 2030. I think that is quite important policy document to how to promote energy revolution in China, including a lot of issues, technology issues, policy issues, but most important thing is how to reform the Chinese energy scheme, especially like energy pricing scheme, and also that including electricity pricing scheme and also gas pricing scheme. That would be very important for us to achieve the low carbon transition of energy system. So this is, I think, is basically the current efforts the Chinese government already done for that. So in the future, I hope that first one, by 2020, we already very clear targets on energy saving and also the energy structure optimization. So we will achieve that and even surpass that target. Based on current situation, we already achieve more in the energy intensity reduction and also the renewable energy development, both about our national targets by 2015. And but in 2030, I think it's a very important thing for us to consider how to promote the scale use of renewable energy, especially wind and solar energy, because that two energy is quite important. However, we still face some challenge, is abundance of wind and solar energy in some areas. So how to how to achieve that would be very important by 2030. By 2050, our national targets now, maybe not regulatory targets, but it's quite clear targets as the low carbon energy or non-fossil fuel target, non-fossil energy, its share will about 50% of total energy consumption by 2050. So that's, I think it's a very important target, and it's very, very, very crucial for us to consider how to support the whole energy system transition towards that target. And third issue, I think, is from long-term perspective, it's very important for us to think is what kind of innovative energy technologies would be needed for China, like energy storage technology, which is very important for renewable energy expansion, especially for such intermittent energy to be used by power grid, to be applied in power grid. So energy storage technology also very important. Another example may be the CCS, carbon capture and storage technology, also very important because as coal maybe still take a very large share in even by 2050. Maybe I think it's very aggressive scenarios that coal still take account of like 25% of total energy consumption by 2050. So we still need some a lot of carbon capture and storage technology. And final one, I think it's also mentioned by my Korean colleague and Japanese colleague previously, that how to use market-based mechanism to support energy transition. Currently, Chinese government provides a lot of subsidy on wind and solar. We have feed-in tariff, but I think it's due to the increase of renewable energy that the amount of this wind and solar become bigger and bigger. So I think that would be a very heavy burden for Chinese government. So we are consider how to use market-based mechanisms to use more market forces to drive the wind and solar development, especially like ETS, emission trading system, and also like green certificate system, which I think that more enterprises can enjoy the profit due to the market's interference in these areas. And also I think it's very, very important, but basically speaking, from the market-based mechanism perspective, it's very important for us to consider is how to internalize the external costs of the energy use, how to return the characteristic of energy to the just like common commodity. So it's very important. I think it's carbon pricing, different kinds of market-based, but the most important perspective for us is to how to achieve the carbon pricing for different kinds of energy. So that is my share, and happy to answer any question.
So thank you, Dr. Liu Qiang. I think that maybe you can get more information about our China climate change action and policy. I think it is updated every year. So this year is
yes. Actually, I think if you are interested, you can go to China Pavilion to pick some Chinese climate change policy and actions. We release that every year, and this year, as we finished that, we complete a lot of information regarding the different aspects of climate change, including mitigation, adaptation, low carbon pilot demonstration, and local actions in different regions, and also that institutional arrangement and policy instruments we use for climate change, and also public concern, public participation, and also international cooperation. So I think that would be a very comprehensive document to introduce that each year's Chinese actions on climate change issues would be very interesting. You can get some useful information, also including the energy-related information. So we have the Chinese version and also English version there.
Okay, thank you. So next we will invite Dr. Duan Fengjun. Please, Duan.
Okay, thank you, Chair. My name is Fengjun Duan. I'm Chinese, but I work in Tokyo. And I come from the Korean Institute for Global Studies, which is an independent private think tank. And so I'm not a representative for the three governments. So I'll try to share something in general about the energy transition. And when we think about the energy transition, almost three keywords will come to my mind. One is the sustainability. And you can transform your energy mix from coal central, for example, in China, to nuclear or renewable energy centers energy mix, but you must keep the sustainability. everybody know the total blackout in this occur in this July in Taiwan. The simple reason is that Taiwan shut down two of four nuclear power plants, and at the same time they didn't prepare enough for coal or natural gas fire plant. So a simple miss of an operator caused a total blackout in Taiwan. And also, another incident in the southern Australia, are almost the same reason, because they didn't carefully examine the sustainability of their grid, of their electricity system. This is one problem, I think, because I know that in Japan now, the Japanese government have a very ambitious target of the biomass fired power generation target. But after carefully examination, you will find that the Japanese, if they achieved the target in 2030, they will import 6% of the biomass from abroad. So that is not sustainable. And this is one point, the sustainability. Another point, because I'm not a policy researcher, I'm an engineer, so I care more about the innovation. And you can say simply the energy transition is simply to say, but it's difficult to do because you need innovation. I don't think the carbon markets can promote the innovation. From the past practices from CDM, you can see that both the solar and the wind technology deployed in some developing countries, but it is not innovation. It is innovated by the industrialized countries in 1970s and 1980s, so it is not new innovation. So now, if we want to go to a zero emission society in 2050 or 26 or something like later than that, you should get some new innovation. And now in energy field, the energy industry is too big. So, and also the electricity is not a common commodity. In the energy sector, only the cost is a dominant factor in the comparison between technologies. So it needs massive investment to research and development, to innovation. So now in China, the government put into the public investments and cause some innovation. In Japan, some private sector got some innovation. And but I don't think the Chinese model can be shared in other countries, because everyone knows China have a very, very, very powerful central government. I don't think any country else can do that. So this is an innovation. The third one is when I'm here to say in this room, I see the title of this session, Energy Transition in East Asia. And also in the opening address, Professor Liu and Ms. Nishida, both of them said that this is a meeting for Asia. And in Asia, there is another big player is India, and a combined player in the ASEAN. But still, the most three important players: China, Japan, and South Korea. So these three countries should develop an Asian-style low-carbon development model for other Asian developing countries. China, I thought the Chinese model is not cannot be shared. They did very a successful top-level design from the central government, and then to formulate very powerful institutions, and then to set some national target, and to allocate this target to every local government to push the energy transition. This is Chinese style. The Japanese style is a kind of bottom-up style. Mrs. Nishida introduced some policy aspect in Japan. From my, as far as I know, the most successful story in Japan is not policy, it's industrial sector. It comes from the industrial sector. The not only energy efficiency, but also new technology. So that is just a bottom-up approach in Japan. But I know, I didn't know anything that I can say. I didn't know anything about South Korea up to today. So I'm surprised that the South Korea is face a very difficult situation now. And I do hope the exchange, the communication of these three countries can develop a model for the Asian developing countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zhuan, and demonstrations on the difference between Japan and China. So the third panel member is Zhou Jun Kim. Kim, please.
I think I could just waive my opportunity to speak and receive questions, if any. I've spoken enough up there, yeah. Yes, I mean, are you going to open the panel, open the floor to questions, or should I wait?
For the schedule, so we finish maybe the panel, and so.
Okay, I'm fine with. I don't have anything
yes.
to talk about. Yes.
So next is
Okay.
Nishida. Yeah.
So from myself, just responding the previous speakers said, yes, for example, industrial sector in Japan, the energy efficiency and technology has been really improved. But actually, if you look at in these 10 years, the energy efficiency improvement is somehow not that much as we compare the before the previous years. So we are thinking we definitely need the more improvement and the energy efficiency and technology improvement, not in the only sector, only industrial sector, but the more, how to say, sector coupling, or the collaboration was not collaboration between the factories and communities and such kind of the relationship over or the beyond the sector is definitely necessary right now. So for that, we think it's really necessary the Japanese government set more ambitious target for energy efficiency and renewable energy. For example, in renewable energy, because of the feed-in tariff, the introduction or deployment has really increased, but there are more potentials, and we think the several many regulations and the situations by the utilities or companies are still a big barrier to increase or to realize the greater deployment of renewables. So I think we definitely need the more improvement in the regulations and also the rules for FIT and other programs. But still, we definitely need the clear sign from the government to the businesses and then the investors to see the nuclear and low carbon future. So otherwise, it is we have big difficulties to get to achieve the target of the Paris Agreement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nisida. So I think that for the schedule, we have still some time remaining, and so maybe we can invite some the question and maybe for the panel member or the previous speakers. So two or small questions. So so please raise your hand and maybe introduce who are you and come from. Okay, please. Oh, they have the microphone. Yeah, they have.
I'll stand if that's okay.
Okay, yeah.
My name is Sean Sweeney. I'm with the trade union delegation, the workers' organizations. I have a question for all the panelists concerning, my question is, what is the role of public financing and public ownership in the energy transition? And I ask the question because the policy environment here in the European Union has changed dramatically with the failure of the emissions trading system, the rollback of the feed-in tariffs because of the cost of the subsidies were being passed on to the public, the move to competitive bidding for renewables, which has actually cut off now investment in renewables because the private investors can't see any money in renewable energy anymore. So the unions I work with, we advocate for the return of public ownership and democratic control of energy systems at the municipal level, at the community level, and at the national level. And I was wondering if that is a feature in the debates in Northeast Asia, given the fact that I think every speaker said none of the countries are actually going to reach their targets, and those, in the case of China, is reaching a target which is based on an increase in emissions, and I think that's true of Korea as well, based on business as usual trajectories, which is not an emissions reduction, that's just an emissions reduction based on business as usual trajectories, which is the essence of the problem of the Paris commitments anyway. They're not consistent with the science-based targets of 1.5 degrees. They are based on a business as usual trajectory. So what role does public ownership and public investment have in really scaling up renewable power and making sure there's a just and fair transition?
Okay, thank you. So, which member? Yeah, okay. Kim?
That's a very good question, and actually this is something that's coming up in our country as well. And as I mentioned, we have done quite a lot of work on revealing the state of coal finance of government-owned institutions in Korea. The figures, if you follow reports published by Oil Change International or the NRDC, Korea's public financial institutions in terms of export credit are one of the are top in the world. Kexim, K-Sure, the ECAs of Korea. The same thing happens on the domestic side as well. Korea Development Bank, our national pension service, is financing a lot of new coal. And at least I understand the European point that leaving it too much to the market sometimes may cause problems. But the problem in this side of Asia, I think Japan, I won't be surprised if Japan is similar as well, is as I said, you have a vertically and horizontally dominated market dominated by a company that holds coal and nuclear, and there's no transparency. A lot of the information is not disclosed, and there are many ways to go around the regulations. They have all the tools. In this market, even though the LCOE curve of renewable is going down, that is not happening. And the financial industry, the public financial industry, the private may be a little bit different. This is also giving a good signal, a signal to believe that, okay, since KEPCO is controlling, the coal and nuclear acid is controlling everything in Korea, it's very fine and safe to go coal, to finance coal, whereas renewables, you know what KEPCO did in the past. That's the story of renewables, which is not the story around the world. So I understand that you have a valid point, but especially in my country, my experience is that this is just too much. The unfairness of the market is just too excessive, that there has to be some changes.
Yeah.
The situation in Japan is similar to Korea, but the one good thing is we started the electricity market reform, and it is, of course, not yet perfect one, but because of that, we can get some data and transparency of the process or getting better. So that's why we can, for example, in our institute, we can utilize the much data and propose the more, how to say, realistic proposition to the government. And also we can utilize such data to show the business risk of the coal power plants and other thermal plants. And that is definitely affect or influence the financial sector. For example, after we published the recent report, many of the financial sector people are coming and discuss with the situation. And I think such kind of the communication with the financial sector is definitely is going to be effective in the near future. But we also try to the public finance organization, but still we have a big barrier to get then really change their behavior, and especially for the export. So we recognize the issue there. So what we are really trying to do is to make this situation really clear to the public, and including the financial sector, to call for their actions. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Liu. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's from my personal view that the question is that the answer is mainly that how to use public financing more efficiently with highest efficiency. So I think it's very important for public financing, firstly, using the beginning of some innovative technologies. For example, from the beginning of wind and solar energy, Chinese government provide a lot of subsidy. I think that can help reduce the cost of wind and solar in large degree. But gradually we need to reduce that subsidy that's on wind and solar and change that to the market-based mechanism. And also that public financing should be used for some infrastructure construction, like power grid construction, especially for some remote areas, which is quite difficult to connect it to grid. So we will use some public financing to support them to build some microgrid themselves in the separated areas. Such kind of issue, I think, is very important. We still need public financing, but we still think need to that how to gradually change public financing to the market-based mechanism. And second thing, I think that now it's very important issue for Chinese government consider is we call that PPP, public-private partnership. I think that is very important, how to integrate public financing together with private financing. I think it's very important for from public policy perspective, is how to build very good policy environment for whole market. The public financing can provide some safeguard, and then that more enterprises would willing to join this market. That would be very important for policy from public policy side. And third one, I think is still very important for us to think is how to develop some innovative public policy issues. For example, I think a subsidy is not so good currently. So I think maybe we need to think about, like currently in China we are talking a lot on the green financing and low carbon financing. Is how to use supporting public finance support to provide a very good incentive for low carbon energy, also green energy. I think that's we have a lot of different designing of that kind of policy, but it's very important. We should think about is more broadly public financing policies. Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, okay, please.
Thank you. The public finance, not only the public financial, the public government will play a leading role in the energy transition from my viewpoint. First of all, if you consider innovation consists of several stages. The first stage is inventor. At that stage, no private sector will invest. That will depend on public financial, or in all of the country. Japanese governments pay about 35% of their GDP into R&D, public investment. And now China pay more than 2% of their GDP into the R&D sectors. The second stage of innovation is demonstration. At this stage, also, there is no private sector will invest to it, because you don't know if it will succeed or fail. So at this stage, perhaps like the Professor Liu said that the PPP, the public-private partnership, in Japan, and in the demonstration stage of a new technology, the public financial will afford about 7% to 75% of the investment, and the 25 to 30% come from private sector. That is the second stage. The third stage, if the demonstration is successful, it will go to the market. But there is no market. In this stage, the government also will play an important role. The government will buy the, not the technology, buy the plant or something else. This is government buying. And finally, in the deployment stage, that has nothing to do with government. That's private sector. So that is not, there is nothing to do with democracy. In the successful story of wind industry in America, in the United States, even though the President Trump stopped the Paris Agreement, but still there are many state governments keep their target together with the wind industry. The biggest industry, wind industry in the United States is Texas. That state is also the fossil fuel state. but they keep the two hands. So I think that how the government to play their role is an issue. In China, governments find a way to combine the environmental benefit together with the energy transition benefit and together with the energy efficiency benefit. So there's many coefficients, so China succeeded. In the United States, when Obama launched the Green New Deal, the biggest problem is not the energy. The biggest problem is the job. How to create a job in Rust Belt, in Detroit. So he succeeded because he turned the automobile factory to wind turbine factory. He created jobs, so there is co-benefit. That is the issue, I think.
Okay, thank you. So for the timing, so we should close our side event. So if you are interested, you can communicate with the member after meeting. So thank you, participants. Thank you, our speakers. Thank you, our panel members. So after meeting, we will upload all the presentation in the website. You can download from the UNFCCC website. So thank you. Bye-bye.